Given that I'll be the primary inhabitant of our new abode, it only makes sense that the largest room becomes mine, she declared confidently. From that moment onward, she staked her claim on our new home with the assertiveness of a seasoned owner. Her brazen remarks ignited a storm of indignation within me. "Pardon me, but I'm curious, where exactly would your room be if you're so insistent?" I countered, unable to contain my irritation. Upon hearing my retort, my sister-in-law flushed crimson and launched towards me. "I'm Sophia, a 32-year-old corporate professional. George, my husband, and I have been inseparable since high school, celebrating 7 years of marriage. Perhaps owing to our extensive shared history, our relationship resembles that of an old married couple more than most couples our age. Nevertheless, I can't fathom being with anyone but George. I've always had a great rapport with my in-laws, and presently we find ourselves cohabiting for various reasons. With my father-in-law on the brink of retirement and my mother-in-law juggling part-time work, we share household responsibilities and contribute to the financial upkeep of the household." Things were cruising along smoothly until an unexpected visitor disrupted the tranquility. One lazy Sunday, as we savored the serenity of the weekend, the jarring sound of a truck reversing shattered the peace. Curiosity piqued, we exchanged puzzled glances. "Did anyone order something?" As she barged in with an entourage of movers, my heart sank. "My room's on the right, second floor," she declared, oblivious to our surprise. "Oh, and I seem to have misplaced the key. Could someone let me in?" A chill ran down my spine at the unmistakable voice. As we approached the front door, there stood Charlotte, my long-absent sister-in-law, flanked by movers lugging cardboard boxes. "Wait a moment, Charlotte. What's the meaning of this sudden appearance without so much as a heads-up? And who are these people with you?" I questioned, a mix of surprise and irritation coloring my tone. Charlotte seemed genuinely perplexed by our reaction. "What do you mean? I quit my job and found myself jobless, so I'm moving back home. Since it's my parents' house, I didn't think it necessary to inform you guys beforehand." "Heh," she explained with a carefree shrug. We stood there dumbfounded, while the movers behind her exchanged uncertain glances. "Never mind them, just get on with moving my stuff in," Charlotte instructed nonchalantly, striding confidently into our home and up the stairs. "Ha, my old room's been turned into a storage space. Get this stuff out of here." Her sharp voice echoed from the second floor, leaving us bewildered. "What do we do now?" I turned to my husband and in-laws, their expressions mirroring my own frustration. "Let's hear her out first and then figure out a plan to get her to leave. Given her stubborn nature, she won't budge if we simply ask her to," my father-in-law suggested wearily, his demeanor suddenly aged. Reluctantly, we piled Charlotte's belongings in the hallway, buying time as we deliberated our next steps. Charlotte's petulant expression was all too familiar, her sulking demeanor grating on my nerves. "Oh, and why are George and his wife here? Are you guys crashing with Mom and Dad because you're broke or something?" she jabbed, her words a sharp reminder of her tactlessness. Charlotte's derisive snort dredged up a flood of unpleasant memories. She was 2 years my junior, yet my disdain for her stretched back to her high school days. Our shared alma mater was the source of our initial acquaintance. I vividly recalled Charlotte's audacious approach during our student years. "You're George's girlfriend, right? Well, since I'm your sister-in-law, why not lend me some money?" she had brazenly demanded. From that very first encounter, she had shown a blatant disregard for boundaries, addressing me disrespectfully despite my seniority. Her audacity didn't stop at her presumptuous request. She even had the nerve to casually ask her own older brother for money. My response was immediate and firm. Absolutely not. Though she bore the title of my boyfriend's sister, I refused to indulge her entitled behavior. Charlotte's reaction to my refusal was predictably disdainful. "Geez, you're so stingy," she retorted, her words dripping with disdain. "Damn," she shot me a disdainful glance before striding away. "You're the crazy one here." That encounter marked my unsettling introduction to my sister-in-law, Charlotte. As it turned out, her behavior towards her own family was even more troubling, a fact my in-laws had been grappling with for quite some time. Her tumultuous history in school was a constant source of concern, prompting frequent summons for her beleaguered parents. Even after graduating, Charlotte remained adrift, her days characterized by idleness and mischief. At our wedding, her antics reached a new low. Her excessive drinking led to a state of inebriation, during which she shamelessly flirted with any man who caught her eye. And as if that weren't enough, she took it upon herself to critique my bridal attire with a pointed, mocking remark. "That dress doesn't suit you one bit," she jeered, followed by a burst of laughter. It was a moment I'd sooner forget. Following her disruptive behavior that day, Charlotte's relationship with her own family deteriorated to the brink of estrangement. Her departure, fueled by anger, left a bitter aftertaste, yet to everyone's astonishment, she resurfaced years later as though nothing had transpired, leaving our family utterly bewildered. "It's because our lease at the old apartment was up. But our new house isn't ready yet, so Dad graciously let us stay here," George clarified, casting a fond glance at Charlotte. "You're building a house, George." "Impressive," Charlotte remarked, her tone laced with sarcasm. "When George and Sophia's new house is ready, we'll be moving out too, Charlotte," my mother-in-law stated icily. "How can you be so heartless toward a daughter who's just endured a breakup and is jobless? Is that how you define motherhood?" "Moving into George's new house signifies a fresh start for us," my father-in-law added, his voice tinged with resolve. "You've always favored George over me," Charlotte shot back at her parents, her footsteps heavy as she stormed up the stairs and out of sight. According to Charlotte, she had experienced a breakup, lost her way, and found herself returning home in search of solace. Since that day, Charlotte's presence shattered the tranquility of our family life. Our lifestyles clashed on multiple fronts. Her late-night, boisterous phone conversations with friends often sparked heated arguments between her and George. Despite shirking any household responsibilities, Charlotte never hesitated to voice her culinary preferences. "Fish? I hate them. Too many pesky bones. Can't you whip up some meatloaf instead?" she'd interject. Fed up with her intrusion, I finally confronted Charlotte. "If you crave meatloaf, kindly prepare it yourself or perhaps contribute to the household expenses. How does that sound?" Charlotte's perpetual attitude towards me only exacerbated the tension. My disdain for her ran deep, so I maintained a formal demeanor whenever interacting with her, a subtle reminder that I wasn't one of her casual acquaintances. Yet she persisted in addressing me only as "Hey" or George's wife. In response, I resolved to reciprocate by addressing her solely as "Hey." Fully aware of her aversion to fish, I confronted her about her lack of contribution to household expenses. "Why should I chip in for my own living expenses? You're nothing but a leech, surviving off George's earnings and my family's support. Don't act so entitled." Charlotte's audacity left me speechless. "Seriously, is that how you perceive it? And how's the job search and apartment hunt going?" "Our new home is nearly ready," I countered. Her face flushed momentarily before she retorted with a smug grin. "Don't worry, I've got it all figured out," her tone dripping with self-satisfaction. In the midst of our heated exchange, my mother-in-law, Susan, appeared visibly concerned. "Sophia, dear, I'm truly sorry if Charlotte is causing you distress. Are you all right?" she inquired, her worry evident in her voice. Dealing with Charlotte had taken its toll on everyone, her stubbornness making it nearly impossible to reason with her. "I'm all right, Susan, but you should take a break too. It seems like Charlotte has gotten the wrong end of the stick." "Is everything all right?" I asked, concern evident in my voice. Susan's response was a heavy sigh. "Even her father and I can't get through to her. She just barricades herself in her room and tells us to stop badgering her. I sometimes wonder if she'd emerge if we set off a bug bomb," Susan quipped, eliciting a chuckle from me. After days of anticipation, our dream home was finally complete. George and I had poured our hearts and souls into saving for the down payment, and now the kitchen bore my personal touch, while the bathroom had been transformed into a haven for my husband's love of long baths. It truly was our dream abode. As we immersed ourselves in the joy of unpacking and settling in, the doorbell interrupted our reverie. Expecting George's parents, I glanced at the monitor to find Charlotte tagging along. "I really don't want her invading our new space," I muttered, unable to suppress a grimace. Charlotte swaggered into our freshly minted abode, her demeanor oozing with arrogance. George really outdid himself. "This place is quite spacious. Nothing beats a brand new home," she proclaimed boldly. She proceeded to fling open doors to various rooms without so much as a "by your leave." My irritation reached its peak, and I was on the verge of giving her a piece of my mind when George's father intervened. "Hey, that's impolite," he scolded her sternly. Unfazed, Charlotte pouted and retorted, "What's the big deal? This is going to be my place now, isn't it?" George wasted no time in shutting down her presumptuousness. Cut the nonsense. You don't have a room here, do you? He snapped. But Charlotte persisted, undeterred by George's firm tone. If my parents are moving in here, then technically, this becomes their house, right? So I do have a right to be here, she argued brazenly. We stood there, dumbfounded by her audacity. It became painfully clear that Charlotte had been eyeing our home as her own from the very beginning. Furthermore, she boldly asserted, since I'll be the one spending the most time at home, the largest room here belongs to me. Charlotte's audacious declaration triggered something within me. Your room? I echoed incredulously. Let's see, shall we? With a calm demeanor, I gestured towards the storage shed outside, typically reserved for garden tools. Even if I were to go out of my way, the only space I could possibly arrange for you would be that old shed. And naturally, you'd still be expected to pay rent. Frankly, I'd rather not have you in our new home at all. Could you please leave? Charlotte's face flushed crimson upon hearing my words. Are you serious? She exclaimed, making a move toward me. Fortunately, my husband George intervened swiftly. That's enough, Charlotte, he interjected firmly. Stop causing unnecessary trouble. In stark contrast to his sister's tumultuous nature, George remained composed and level-headed. The only one he'd ever raise his voice against is this woman, Charlotte, who never seems to have any respect for her older brother, George retorted firmly. As our father-in-law's authoritative voice boomed down, even Charlotte fell silent. Charlotte, cut the theatrics and listen up. We're not moving in here, and you need to come to terms with the fact that our old home is gone, George asserted. I couldn't help but stifle a chuckle as I glanced at Charlotte, whose expression resembled that of a startled deer caught in headlights. From the outset, Charlotte seemed to assume that George and I, along with her parents, would continue living together in our new abode. However, that wasn't the case. We had been informed some time ago that our parents were planning to sell the family home and relocate to the countryside. The reason was plain and simple. We're just tired of dealing with Charlotte's antics all the time. We want to enjoy our retirement in peace. Our mother-in-law had expressed her frustration. Charlotte had stormed out of their old home, declaring, I never want to set foot in this house again. I don't consider you guys as parents to me. Just disappear already. Living with Charlotte had taken a heavy toll on my in-laws. Her volatile temperament had led to numerous conflicts, some of which even resulted in legal disputes. Despite her reckless behavior, Charlotte remained unrepentant, leaving her parents to foot the bill for settlements. To cover these expenses, our mother-in-law had taken up part-time work, the financial burden imposed by Charlotte weighing heavily on the family. George and I had done our best to support them, striving to maintain some semblance of peace in our lives amidst the chaos. However, Charlotte, seemingly oblivious to the havoc she had wreaked, showed no gratitude towards her parents. Instead, she only sought their assistance when it suited her own needs. My frustration with her behavior had reached its breaking point. Then I'll just move into your new house with you guys, or I'll end up on the streets, Charlotte finally admitted, a hint of panic evident in her voice as she confronted the truth. Enough, Charlotte. The answer is a resounding no. We've tried to reason with you countless times, but you've refused to listen. Did you honestly believe we overlook everything simply because we're your parents? We're not immune to hurt, Charlotte. We have emotions too. And let's not forget your own words. You guys are no parents of mine. Just disappear already. Our mother-in-law's tone was icy as she addressed Charlotte, whose expression betrayed a mix of shock and realization. Observing Charlotte's crumbling facade, George and I exchanged a knowing glance. Dad, Charlotte's return wasn't prompted by heartbreak or job loss. Sophia and I are fully aware of the truth, George asserted, causing Charlotte to visibly pale. In reality, Charlotte was involved with a married colleague, he continued. She knew about his marital status but chose to continue the affair nonetheless. And when his wife discovered the truth, the affair imploded. Both Charlotte and her lover lost their jobs due to the scandal. They're divorced now, and coincidentally, your lover's wife, who happens to be my friend, crossed paths with me recently. Seeing her after such a long time, I was taken aback by how much weight she had lost. Enjoy your role as a homewrecker. I couldn't help but lash out. You know there's a special place in hell for people like you. Tears threatened to spill as I grappled with the weight of the situation. My husband and I had discussed it, but we hadn't broached the topic with my in-laws yet. We were afraid of upsetting them. No, it's not like that. I fell in love with him, and I couldn't help it. Charlotte defended herself with the same tired excuses that cheaters often use, her gaze chillingly indifferent. Glancing at my in-laws, I could see the fury in their eyes. Without a word, they swiftly escorted Charlotte back to their home. Later, my in-laws informed me that my sister-in-law had resorted to doing household chores in a desperate attempt to gain their approval for moving into their new home. However, their sentiments remained unchanged. "Pack your things and leave," my father-in-law repeated like a broken record. "Why?" "I've been working hard around the house. I've been doing laundry and vacuuming. What more do you want?" Charlotte finally erupted. "There's nothing special about what you're doing. It's basic self-care. Did you expect to be praised for that? You're an adult," my mother-in-law retorted sharply. My sister-in-law blushed, adding a layer of embarrassment to her already wounded pride. "I already made my will. All inheritance will go to George. There isn't much left because of you. You've been written out of the will. It's likely to be approved by the court," my father-in-law declared, leaving my sister-in-law visibly stunned. As my in-law's moving day approached, coinciding with my father-in-law's retirement, my sister-in-law had drastically downsized her possessions to just one suitcase. According to my mother-in-law, she had sold off most of her belongings for cash. As we bid farewell to my in-laws and turned to head back to her car, my sister-in-law inexplicably followed us. "What's the matter?" I asked, puzzled by her presence. "I have nowhere else to go," she admitted, her voice breaking. "Please, I want to live in your house too. I'll take the small room." But more than her plea, it was the term "sis" that sent shivers down my spine. I glanced at George, and it was clear he shared my sentiments. "Hell no, live with us. Not in your wildest dreams," he retorted bluntly as we made our way to the car and drove off without a second thought. A few days later, while enjoying a quiet day at home, the doorbell interrupted our peace. Seeing the figure on the other side, we both let out a resigned sigh. "Stop bothering us. Do you want us to call the cops?" I warned as I opened the door, only to find my sister-in-law standing there, her desperation evident as she knelt before me. "Please let me stay. I've been bouncing between hotel rooms and odd jobs, but I can't keep living like this," she pleaded. My husband and I were taken aback by the depths of her self-imposed predicament. "I don't care. We're not family anymore," I asserted, attempting to close the door. However, she clung to it stubbornly. "Just give me some money. I've maxed out my credit cards, assuming my parents would bail me out again. And I have alimony to pay, you know. If your friend is really friends with my lover's wife, maybe she could help negotiate a lower payment for me," she implored. We had no desire to engage with her, but her audacious selfishness pushed me over the edge. "Don't push me. I've never encountered someone as despicable as you. Stay away from me. I never want to see your face again," I snapped. Despite her insistence, she refused to leave. Suddenly, her face drained of color as she noticed our dogs barking from inside the house. "Wait, you have a dog?" she questioned, taken aback. We had adopted one of the 3 puppies from my parents' dog. "Would you like to see it?" I offered. Her reaction was immediate. "Who? What? No way. I can't stand dogs. You must be insane to live with one. Count me out of this house," she stormed off, her anger palpable. To be honest, my sister-in-law harbors a deep aversion to dogs. According to George, a childhood incident where a large dog playfully chased her left her traumatized, instilling a lasting fear and dislike for dogs. "Thanks for scaring off that lady, Maron," I murmured, giving our toy poodle a gentle pat. Since then, we haven't crossed paths with my sister-in-law. However, a friend mentioned spotting her in worn-out attire in a distant town. Her current circumstances don't concern me. Frankly, I hope she faces some hardships. George and I are relishing the tranquility of our new home. His parents seem to be thoroughly enjoying their rural lifestyle, occasionally reaching out through video calls and visits. They've managed to keep their address concealed from my sister-in-law, preventing any unwelcome surprises. Both appear healthier and happier, as if a weight has been lifted off their shoulders. A few months after settling into our new abode, we received a wonderful blessing. A baby is on the way. I had heard that stress could impact fertility, which may have been a factor in our previous struggles to conceive. Now, we eagerly anticipate the arrival of our newest family member next year. Gazing at George, his joy evident, I gently caressed my growing bump, filled with hope that he'll remain by my side through all our future endeavors.
I understood what was happening as I watched my sister's in-laws' house from far away. When I realized the truth, I was shocked. I wondered about the intentions of my sister's husband and his family towards her all this time. How many times had they tricked my sister with a straight face? It was unforgivable. No matter what, I was determined to make them pay. My name is Sally, and I'm 45 years old. When I tried to wear my funeral clothes again after a long time, I couldn't zip up the dress around my stomach. At first, I thought my body hadn't changed much, but it was obvious I'd gained some belly fat. The last time I wore this dress was when I was 30. My sister Jane, who had a weak heart since she was young, sadly passed away at 27 due to worsening pneumonia that led to heart failure. It's strange that I was the only one who spoke with Jane before she passed away. I happened to visit her in the hospital that day. Jane probably had many plans since she was only in her second year of marriage. She likely never thought she'd leave this world so soon. When I remember her smile as she talked about wanting to stroll under the autumn leaves after leaving the hospital, it breaks my heart. On the day of Jane's funeral, when I couldn't come to terms with her tragic death, something happened. Just before the ceremony started, I went to the restroom. There, I saw Jane's husband Bob talking on the phone in the nearby lounge. Yeah, once the funeral is done and Christmas rolls around, things should settle down a bit. Yeah, you're right. No, we should keep a low profile until the memorial mass about a year later. I don't usually listen in on people's phone calls, but this time I couldn't help but be curious about what they were saying. What does he mean by keep a low profile until the memorial mass about a year later? The deceased, he must mean Jane, right? The way Bob is talking, it doesn't sound like he's talking to a colleague. All of Jane's family is here at the ceremony. Who could he be talking to? Sorry for keeping you waiting. Yeah, I get it. No, the kid's fine. They don't suspect a thing. Neither my wife nor anyone in her family has noticed I have a child. Just stay home and relax. What? I was shocked. Did he just say he has a child? For the record, Jane and Bob didn't have any children. They decided not to because it was uncertain if Jane's body could handle childbirth. They were both in their first marriages, and we never heard anything about Bob having a child. What's happening? Honestly, Bob's strange conversation left me confused and overwhelmed with thoughts. But suddenly, I remembered the words Jane desperately tried to tell me just before she went into surgery. There's a child at home. After Jane lost consciousness and passed away a few days later without waking up, I never got to hear the rest of what she wanted to say. I was the only one who heard those words. The shock of losing Jane was so huge that I didn't have time to think about what she meant. But when I connected Jane's words about home with what Bob said about stay at home in their old house, which Sally wouldn't call their parents' house, just home. But there were no children in our family home either. After a bit of thinking, it hit me all of a sudden. Could it be that the child Bob was talking about on the phone is living at Bob's parents' house? When that idea came to mind, I couldn't sit still. If that were true, I don't think I could forgive Bob. After paying my respects at Jane's memorial service, I was eager to test my theory. I left the funeral home right away and went straight to Bob's parents' house. It's within walking distance from Jane and Bob's place. Bob is an only child, and his parents are getting older, so they decided to live close by. Jane had worries about living so close to her in-laws, wondering if she could get along with them better. But in reality, they hardly ever went back there and had very little family interaction. Maybe that's why even at Jane's funeral, Bob's parents didn't seem too upset about what happened. Instead, they seemed more interested in playing with their phones, which I found kind of strange. Well, I guess this is what happens when the relationship with in-laws is so distant. At least they could pretend to be more sympathetic at a time like this. Remembering how Bob's parents behaved, I finally reached Bob's parents' house. I hesitated to ring the doorbell. Everyone should be at Jane's funeral, so there shouldn't be anyone home. But what if someone did answer the door? What would I say? I still didn't have any proof of Bob's wrongdoing, and I wasn't confident about confronting someone without evidence. As I thought about this, I went around to the back of the house and peeked inside through a window that wasn't closed. I could see the whole room. Could someone really be in there? Just as my heart skipped a beat. Hey, stop moving. Look, stay still. Yeah. A child ran out into the yard, followed by a woman I didn't recognize. I instinctively hid and watched them from the shadows. The child looked a lot like Bob, with wobbly steps indicating he'd just started walking a few months ago. The woman seemed to be around Bob's age, and her eyes resembled the child's, making me certain she was the mother. Oh God, did Bob really cheat on my sister? When did this betrayal start? When did Jane find out? Even though my suspicions seemed to fit together perfectly, I had so many questions and didn't feel any better. Instead, tears started to well up. I'll never forgive him. I promised myself to make him pay for what he did to my sister. Later, I went back to the funeral home and attended Jane's burial in the churchyard. Even though everyone thought I left halfway through, when I explained that I couldn't handle the shock of losing Jane, they seemed to understand. I highly doubt anyone would suspect I went to Bob's house, but I was relieved that my sister's in-laws didn't seem to notice anything strange at all. The next day, I made up my mind to ask for a private investigation on Bob from the only detective agency in town. To my surprise, it was run by Jane's friend Layla, whom I remembered from the funeral. Layla told me that Jane had also asked for an investigation on her husband. After she requested the investigation, Jane got sick and passed away. Even though I have to keep things confidential, I think Jane would have wanted you to know, Layla said. With that, Layla shared the details and findings of the investigation Jane had requested. Once, even though they were engaged, Jane and Bob almost broke up. Bob got cold feet just 6 months before their wedding, saying he wasn't sure he could protect Jane, who had a weak heart, and he wanted some space. After a lot of thinking, Jane agreed and decided to distance herself from Bob. However, about 2 months later, Bob apologized and said he wanted to marry Jane after all, so they patched things up and went ahead with the wedding. After that, Bob worked really hard, even on his days off, because he wanted to buy Jane a house in the future. Jane talked about their relationship like everything was fine, like she was proud of it, so I thought they were okay. But I was wrong, Layla explained. In reality, right after getting engaged to Jane, Bob started having an affair with his childhood friend Nancy. They had dated before but broke up over a small disagreement. Even though Bob met Jane and got engaged, he still had feelings for Nancy. When Nancy reached out to him, those old feelings came back. To make matters worse, Bob's excuse about getting cold feet was a lie. Around the same time, Nancy got pregnant, and Bob was torn about whether to leave Jane and marry her. He even talked about it with some friends, but Nancy was firm in her decision. "If you stay with me, I won't ask you to marry me. But I'm going to have this baby," Nancy told Bob. Bob didn't want to break up with Nancy, but he also didn't want to tell his wife Jane about the baby. At the same time, he couldn't ignore a child he might have with someone he cared about. He didn't want Nancy to have the baby, but she was determined to keep it. Eventually, Bob opened up to his parents about the situation, only for them to say, "This will be our first grandchild, so let her have the baby." Bob's parents had always preferred Nancy as his partner since they knew her well from childhood. Plus, they didn't seem to like Jane much because she was frail and might not give them a grandchild, which they often complained about to others. Fortunately, Jane is frail, and she won't last long. Once she's gone, acknowledge the child and marry Nancy, Bob's parents proposed, and Nancy agreed. Though it was a twisted plan, it appealed to Bob. If his parents say so, then it must be okay, he thought. So it was decided that Nancy would have the child. Nancy, like Bob, was an only child, and her parents had already passed away. That's why Bob's parents spent a lot of time at Nancy's house, helping her during her pregnancy. The story about Bob working hard for Jane right after their wedding was a lie. He was probably visiting his newborn baby during that time. There were witnesses who saw Bob going to Nancy's house often, Layla explained. This suggests that the excuse of moving closer to their elderly parents was also a lie. They actually wanted to be near the child. As the child grew up, they respected Bob's parents' wish to spend more time with their grandchild, so Nancy and the child stayed more often at their house. With various excuses, they kept Jane away from her in-laws, and eventually they stopped going home altogether. It's enraging how they're endorsing infidelity as a family, Layla concluded. Just a month ago, my sister found out about Bob's cheating. She was feeling sick and left work early, probably not realizing that Jane was home. Bob, who hardly ever texted or called when Jane was around, came home earlier than usual that day and apparently made a call somewhere. "I got off work early. Can I come over now?" "My wife? She's at work. I don't think she'll find out. She seems to be getting sick a lot lately and might go to sleep early. If I say I'm working late, I think I can stay longer with you," Bob said. "Yeah, I also want to live with Nancy and the kids soon. Every time she says she's not feeling well. I think she won't last much longer, replied the other person. Yay, I'm looking forward to it every time. Just imagining how Jane felt hearing that from her sickbed makes my heart ache. This incident made Jane aware of Bob's cheating, and she seemed to have hired a private investigator who happened to be her friend Layla. The investigation revealed everything, and just as Jane was about to confront Bob with a divorce, she collapsed and passed away. As Layla finished telling me all this, she lowered her gaze and said, "Jane must have been heartbroken." I couldn't agree more. I wanted to avenge Jane's pain. I couldn't bear the thought of Bob and his parents enjoying having a grandchild while Bob planned to remarry. But I've only just learned all this, and I don't know what to do. After thinking for a while, I had an idea. "Layla, are you good with computers?" At my words, Layla smiled and said, "I got this." The next day, I went to my sister's in-law's house. When I rang the doorbell, my sister's mother-in-law appeared on the monitor, looking surprised to see me. "Oh, Sally, what's going on?" she asked, sounding a bit anxious. "I need to talk to the family about Jane's things. Can we talk for a moment?" Hearing my request, my sister's mother-in-law fell silent, and the intercom went quiet. Oh no, maybe she won't let me in. Feeling nervous, I waited for a while. And then Bob appeared, saying, "I'm sorry, Sally. The room was messy, so I had to tidy up a bit. Please come in." "Oh, Bob, you're here. Perfect timing," I said with a smile. Bob's expression stiffened. He probably thinks I haven't figured out his cheating yet. His face stiffened, likely because he's hiding something. In fact, I had just seen his mistress and their child through the window. I bet he was cleaning up after them. I wonder which room they're in. Bob and my sister's in-laws seemed uneasy as they watched me enter the room. As soon as I took a sip of the tea they served me, Bob asked, "What's this about Jane's belongings?" Yeah. It's about this," I said, laying out a photograph on the table. Bob and his parents froze as they looked at the photo. "Bob, who is this woman?" I asked. "I don't know her," Bob replied hastily. In the photo, Bob and a woman were in bed together. The other day, this was sent to our house. It said that Bob is having an affair, I explained. Hearing this, his parents glared at Bob, and Bob shook his head frantically. "Wait, I don't remember this photo," he shouted. Ignoring his protests, I laid out more photographs. Each one showed Bob and the same woman kissing or on a date at a nearby amusement park. "People who cheat don't usually admit to their memory lapses, do they?" I said, feeling the tension rise. "I'm used to it," my sister's mother-in-law sharply retorted. "What are you implying, young lady?" "No. Mom, you've got it all wrong." "I don't know anything about this," Bob protested. "Then what's this picture about?" Even though you have a child with Nancy, I immediately responded to my sister's mother-in-law's words. My sister's father-in-law looked guilty and said, "Oh, you mean this child? And is this woman Nancy?" I asked, showing a photograph of Bob holding a child. "What?" The entire in-law family was speechless, and even though Bob kept denying the accusation, my sister's mother-in-law slapped him, calling him a worthless son. "Do you have other children too?" she demanded. "Please listen to me, Mom, Dad," Bob pleaded. But my sister's in-laws ignored Bob's pleas, scolding him for betraying their beloved grandchild. "What nonsense bringing this here?" The picture was sent to her house. "I don't know much about it either," Bob exclaimed. "I came here seeking clarity, but it seems Bob does have a child," I said, preparing for a confrontation. Bob was at a loss for words. But honestly, Bob was telling the truth. He doesn't have any other affair besides Nancy. I didn't plan to reveal this, as I didn't want to be accused of spreading false information later on. However, this picture is fake. It's a composite one that I had Layla create. I could have used a real picture of the child with the actual person Bob cheated with, but I chose a combined photo because of certain reasons. I planned to confront him by asking him about the child, but luckily, my sister's mother-in-law revealed the truth earlier than I expected. "So, your quietness means it's true, isn't it? Earlier, your mom also mentioned something about a child and Nancy," I said while my sisters-in-law stayed still where they were. "The note that came with the picture said these kids are being looked after in this house." "That's not true." My sister's mother-in-law quickly disagreed with what I said. "Are you sure?" "Of course, it's not true." "Then show me all the rooms." Huh? Without waiting for their approval, I stood up from my seat and headed towards the room next door. Hey, wait a minute. You can't just snoop around other people's houses. Bob raised his voice. If there's nothing to hide, then you should show me. That's not the point. Then what's the issue? Well, without waiting for Bob's response, I ignored the attempts of my sister's in-laws to stop me and peeked into the next room. She's not here, I concluded, and then I went upstairs to the second floor. Despite facing obstacles and scraping my knee, it was nothing compared to my sister's pain. I was willing to endure any number of fresh wounds. Pushing past my sister's in-laws, I opened the door to the room on the second floor, pushing Bob aside as I did so. Ah, there she is. In the room, Nancy and a child were sitting on the bed. Well, who do we have here? It was a different woman and child from the ones in the picture. What's happening? Bob asked. At my words, Bob turned pale, and Nancy looked puzzled, saying, "A picture?" Yes, it seems like Bob here has been cheating while my sister was around. Look at this picture. As I showed the fake photo to Nancy, her face twisted in anger, and she crumpled the picture. What is this? You were with another woman. No, Nancy, it's not like that. Just listen. Nancy was furious, and Bob looked pale. Having gotten the proof I needed, I'd added, "So you were indeed involved with Bob, huh?" My sister's in-laws were stunned, unable to believe what was happening. Why? You told me I was the only one. You said we didn't have to get married, and I wanted to have a child and be with you. And now this. Nancy, there must be some mistake. Maybe it's a look-alike or Photoshop. What do you mean, maybe? You can't deny it completely. I can't trust you anymore. For a moment, I was surprised by the mention of Photoshop, but since Bob was too flustered to deny it properly, Nancy's suspicions were at their peak. A man who's so unsure of himself, you'd be better off not trusting him. He ruined my sister's life, I said, offering my serious advice. Nancy's face hardened. My sister went through a lot because of him, but she probably understands that already. I don't need to say anything, I thought to myself. Now, I need to act like I'm on Nancy's side and get her to listen to me to achieve my goal of not letting any of Bob's family or Nancy be happy. I understand, Nancy muttered. Wait, Nancy, I'm serious about you, I interrupted Bob's desperate attempt to win Nancy over. So you weren't serious about my sister, but you told her you were, even made marriage vows to her. Looks like you really are an untrustworthy man, Bob, I said. At my words, Nancy's face darkened. With a fake photo and everything, she seemed to start doubting whether Bob's words were sincere. Good. If you were serious, you wouldn't be cheating from the beginning. No matter what, you should stick to one person, I emphasized. As I stressed my point, Nancy's expression grew even darker. Bob's face turned ghostly pale. He must have sensed the growing distance in Nancy's feelings. We should break up, Bob. I don't want to be your backup option. After seeing that photo, I can't trust you anymore. I could handle being the other woman, but I can't stand the thought of being the third one, Nancy declared, tears flowing down her cheeks. Bob instinctively reached for her hand and pleaded, "Please, just listen to me." But Nancy pulled away, stating firmly, "I don't need you to acknowledge the child anymore. Just leave me alone." As Nancy left the house with her child, Bob's entire family was saddened by the loss of both the child and the planned second wife. Meanwhile, I felt a sense of victory inside. Later, I had Bob write a legal document officially ending his ties with our family, cutting off all connections. Additionally, he agreed to relinquish any rights he had to the inheritance left by my sister. My father, who is usually quite stern, heard everything from me and stormed into my sister's in-laws' home. They were shocked by his sudden appearance and seemed to agree to renounce any claim to the inheritance, wanting to sever ties with our family completely. Well, even though we call it my sister's inheritance, it wasn't much. But it's a relief that not a single cent of her assets went to him, I thought. On the day I brought the photos to Bob's house, it seems one of the windows was open. As a result, our argument and conversation could be heard clearly outside, along with revelations from Nancy's friend who lived nearby. Everything that happened in Bob's house was exposed to the entire neighborhood. As a result, rumors spread that Bob's house was cursed, and he decided to quit his job and leave town with his parents. Meanwhile, Nancy unexpectedly showed up at our family home after about 2 months. She came bearing $50,000 as a gesture of apology and gratitude for helping her see the truth. She wanted to make amends for how she had treated my sister. While I appreciated Nancy's intentions, money couldn't erase the pain my sister had endured. It didn't feel right for us to forgive someone for something they themselves couldn't forgive just because they offered money. We understood Nancy's gratitude, but we couldn't accept money from someone who had done such a shameful thing, so I declined to accept the money. Instead, we suggested that it be donated to a nearby children's home where my sister used to work. Do you doubt whether such a woman would actually follow through with the donation? Of course not. I went with her to ensure the donation was made properly, so you can trust that it happened. If the money is used for that purpose, I believe my sister would be happy. I hope the children who have their whole lives ahead of them can find happiness, even on behalf of my sister. As for myself, it's hard to admit, but I struggled with the loss of my sister for a while, even experiencing mental health challenges. There was a time when it was so tough that I had to leave my job. But I've been gradually recovering, and now I work at Layla's detective agency. Leela and I became very close after that incident. I think it's because we were both comrades who had lost something important in such a tragic way. We found common ground. Although I didn't have a positive view of marriage because of what happened to my sister after being with my partner for 4 years, we got married last year. The experience of losing my sister during the COVID-19 pandemic made me realize that I never know when I might lose the chance to be with my loved ones. So I decided to get married. I want to cherish every moment with those I care about, without any regrets. Just watch me, Jane. I promise to live a long, fulfilling life for both of us. When I join you someday, we'll have a blast together, I declared, determined to live life to the fullest. Hi, I'm Alice, and I'm 28 years old. I work with kids. Recently, my boyfriend Tom proposed to me, and now I'm visiting his parents for the first time. Tom went to a really good university and has a cool job. He's smart, and everyone at work likes him. I've always thought highly of him. His dad seemed happy about us getting married and even said they never had a daughter and that Tom's mom would be happy too. But when I looked at his mom, she seemed upset. She had a frown on her face, like she was mad about something. Then, out of nowhere, she asked me if it's true that I didn't finish high school. She seemed to think that because Tom is so successful, I shouldn't be good enough for him. I felt really surprised and hurt by what she said. I told her it was rude to talk to me like that, and Tom also defended me, saying that my education doesn't matter. Both Tom and his dad stood up for me against his mom. But my mother-in-law didn't seem to calm down. She kept saying that it's natural for a mom to worry about who her son is marrying, especially about their education and job. She even talked about how children inherit their mom's genes, so she wanted to make sure her future grandkids would be great too. It felt like she was really stuck on the idea that I wasn't good enough because I didn't finish high school. It's true that some people care a lot about education and parents want the best for their kids, but it made me sad to think I was being judged just because I didn't graduate. There's actually a reason for that. My dad died in a car accident when I was young, so my mom had a tough time raising me and my twin sister Emma. To help out, I started working after middle school. Now, I'm going to night school to finish my high school diploma. I'm working hard and saving money, and I might even go to college someday. Tom supports me in this, and he's even offered to help pay for my college. Tom understands where I come from, and he's really caring. That's one of the reasons I love him and want to marry him. But it seems like my mother-in-law doesn't like this idea. Tom is an only child, so we might end up living with his parents in the future. I'm a little worried about how things will go if my mother-in-law already seems so against me. A while after, I moved in with my future in-laws, just a month away from our wedding. As the big day got closer, I had to make more trips to the wedding place to double-check everything. I also had to book hotels for our out-of-town guests. With work, school, and wedding stuff, I was super busy. But my mother-in-law didn't seem happy with how I was handling everything. Today, I was getting ready to go to the venue and putting on makeup when she suddenly said, "Oh my, what are you wearing?" She saw my outfit and blurted it out. "I'm getting ready to go to the venue. So I thought I'd dress up," I explained. I wasn't sure if she didn't like me dressing up for the venue or if she just wanted to criticize me. You say you're going to the venue, but you're just dressing like that to attract men, aren't you? You're so careless, she accused. She just assumed I was meeting another man instead of going to the venue. I didn't know what to say. I told her I was meeting Tom at the venue and suggested she ask him if she had doubts. But she didn't listen and just kept thinking I was up to something. Then, out of nowhere, my mother-in-law messed up my carefully styled hair. "Hey, what are you doing, mother-in-law? I spent so much time getting ready. This is terrible," I exclaimed. My hair was a mess and I couldn't go out like that. But instead of apologizing, my mother-in-law said, "There's no need to fix it. This hairstyle suits a high school dropout like you. You should wear your hair like this for the wedding." I was already late, so I quickly fixed my hair and rushed to the venue where Tom was waiting. When I got there, Tom saw my upset face and asked what happened. I was torn about whether to tell Tom what happened earlier, but I didn't want to bring up something so upsetting when we were supposed to be talking about the wedding plans. So, I decided not to tell him at that moment. Then, as the wedding date got closer, my mother-in-law came up with a surprising idea. She said, "Hey, Alice's mom lives far away, right? It must be hard for her to come and stay in a hotel. Why doesn't she stay with us?" Tom and I were both surprised by her suggestion. It would save money on hotels and it could help our families bond better. Tom suggested I talk to my mom about it, so I did right away. My mom was really happy with the idea, and we decided that my twin sister Emma would come too. At first, I thought my mother-in-law was being nice, but I had no idea what she would do next. The day before the wedding, my mom and sister came to stay at my in-laws' house. Seeing them after such a long time made me really happy. My sister Emma and I are super close, so we decided to share a room for the night. Emma fell asleep quickly after having a few drinks. She's out like a light, I thought, knowing she wouldn't wake up easily. Just as I was about to go to sleep too, I heard the door to our room open. I was puzzled and then heard a buzzing noise, like someone was shaving something. "Now you won't be able to go to the ceremony tomorrow, will you? No need for hair for a girl who didn't finish middle school," I heard my mother-in-law say. I was shocked and turned on the lights. "Mother-in-law, what are you doing?" I exclaimed. The person in the bed suddenly sat up, surprising my mother-in-law too. "Huh, mother-in-law, you're Alice, right?" she said, confused. She had mistaken me for Emma. "That's not my hair. We're twins, and our faces really look alike," I explained. It turned out that it wasn't me whose hair got shaved, it was my sister Emma. "What? How could this happen? It was supposed to be Alice," my mother-in-law exclaimed, clearly shocked. But Emma was still fast asleep, probably due to the drinks she had. When she wakes up and realizes her hair is gone, she'll be really mad. Emma's not one to hold back her feelings, so I knew she'd be furious. "I can't cover for you on this, mother-in-law," I told her, feeling guilty. She probably left the room feeling uneasy. The next morning, Emma saw herself in the mirror and freaked out. She was furious about being bald. Our mom was there too and couldn't help but cry in shock. Tom was disturbed too, saying, "This is terrible. Who would do such a thing?" So, I decided to tell everyone what happened the day before. I was curious to see how my mother-in-law would react this morning, but she wasn't around. My father-in-law said she went for an early walk and hadn't come back yet. I started worrying that she might have run away, so I told her relatives everything and went to look for her. About 30 minutes later, a relative called me to say they found her at a nearby convenience store, so my father-in-law went there. My mother-in-law came back home with a bunch of excuses, unaware that she was being searched for. When she got home, she immediately said, "I didn't do anything wrong. It's all Alice's fault." Alice used the clippers on her own and shaved Emma's hair while she was sleeping next to her. I told everyone, shocked that she was trying to blame me. "Don't be absurd. I didn't do anything. Weren't you the one who entered the room yesterday? It's ridiculous that you're still lying about it," I snapped, feeling frustrated by her denial. But my mother-in-law kept denying her involvement. Then my father-in-law seemed to recall something. He went outside and returned with something in his hand. "Alice, is this the clipper?" he asked, holding it out to me. When I looked at the clipper, I instantly recognized it as the one my mother-in-law used last night to shave off Emma's hair. "That's it. That's the clipper." "But where did you find it?" I asked, feeling confused. "It seems this clipper originally belonged to your father-in-law. He's always been particular about his appearance and carried grooming tools with him. When we checked his car, the compartment where he kept his grooming stuff was messed up, and the clipper was gone," my husband explained. I always keep my car keys in the bedroom. If there's brown hair in this clipper, then it's clear that your mom is the one responsible, my father-in-law added, beginning to take apart the clipper. Inside the clipper was unmistakably brown hair, which we knew belonged to Emma. She probably couldn't clean it properly because she had to rush out in the dark, my father-in-law concluded, displaying the hair to everyone. My mother-in-law sank to her knees. Alice, it's all because of you. You tricked Tom, despite being uneducated and poor. I wanted you to leave Tom no matter what, she confessed. I felt sickened by my mother-in-law's selfish words, but the one who reacted the strongest was Emma, who had her hair shaved off. I don't care what's happening to you, Emma said strongly. What can we do now? I can't go to the wedding looking like this, she said, sounding upset. Emma's father-in-law heard her worry and called a friend who knew how to fix hair. They decided to bring a wig quickly. It would help Emma's hair look better for now. But they needed to find a solution for her mother-in-law too. 30 minutes later, the friend of Emma's father-in-law came with the wig, and Emma looked beautiful with her new hair. At first, they thought about cutting the mother-in-law's hair like they did with Emma, but they didn't feel right about it. Instead, they decided to reveal the mother-in-law's bad actions to everyone. At the wedding, there were some landlords who had been helping the mother-in-law's family for a long time. They were close to Emma's father-in-law, and hearing about what happened would surely affect the mother-in-law's parents. The landlords had been giving them a discount on their rent, but they might stop helping them once they found out about the mother-in-law's behavior. They might even make things worse by increasing the rent or making them leave the apartment. The mother-in-law's parents were poor and depended on this help. If they were forced to leave their apartment, they would have to stay with the mother-in-law. But from what Tom had said before, it seemed like the mother-in-law didn't get along with her parents and wouldn't want to take care of them. Living with her parents would be very difficult for the mother-in-law. Please wait, I'll be in big trouble if you do that. I'm really sorry, it was my fault. I got carried away and did something wrong. I'm sorry, Emma. I'll compensate you for the damage, so please forgive me. The mother-in-law kept apologizing over and over again, bowing down on the floor. But even with all the apologies, Emma's hair couldn't be fixed. After talking it over, they decided that Emma's father-in-law and Tom would tell everyone about what the mother-in-law did. Emma had already agreed to this. The mother-in-law said she didn't want to go to the wedding and tried to escape, but Emma and Tom stopped her. When they got to the wedding place, relatives who had heard of the situation through messages looked very worried as they approached us. We showed everyone what the mother-in-law did wrong, and Emma bravely took off her wig, revealing her bald head. Everyone was shocked, especially the women, who couldn't believe it. For a woman, her hair is very important, so imagine the shock of suddenly having it shaved off. Seeing Emma like this made some people cry. Then, as expected, the landlord came to the mother-in-law and asked if it was true. At first, she tried to lie, but Emma's father-in-law encouraged her to tell the truth, and she finally admitted it. The landlord was furious and also scolded the mother-in-law. After that, the mother-in-law looked sad during the rest of the ceremony, which was unusual for her. The wedding went well, and we were happy to have the blessings of many people. But we couldn't stay in the same house with the mother-in-law anymore. So we decided to move to our own apartment and start a new life as a couple. The mother-in-law panicked when she realized we were leaving the house. She cried and begged us not to go, but we couldn't stay with her anymore. Even the father-in-law felt the same way. He told her he wanted a divorce and asked her to leave the house. The mother-in-law looked scared and held onto the father-in-law, pleading with him to reconsider. She said she had nowhere else to go because she didn't get along with her own parents. She was trembling and looked like she might collapse at any moment. But I didn't feel sorry for her, considering what she did to Emma. I never expected someone to shave my head while I was sleeping, mistaking me for Emma. The mother-in-law kept trying to convince us to let her stay, but the father-in-law contacted her parents, and eventually she had to leave the house. Now, she's living with her parents, even though they have a difficult personality, and she's struggling to take care of them all by herself. The mother-in-law kept calling us, wanting to start over, but we didn't want to live with her again, so we blocked her calls. Now, we're living happily with the father-in-law in his old house. We decided to renovate it together. The father-in-law built his dream study, Tom set up a display area for his model figures, and I installed a modern kitchen. We also made a room for the child we plan to have in the future. Now, the three of us are living comfortably. Emma's hair, which was shaved off before, has grown back short and looks great. Her friends love her new look. She jokes about what happened, which sometimes makes me feel conflicted. Emma visits us for sleepovers sometimes, and I always look forward to that. Even though there might be challenges ahead, I believe we can overcome them together. Hey, I expected you to be smarter, lady, Mark said with a mean look, leaning back in his chair. You're married to Nick, but you're not very good at stuff. Nick had a rough marriage with you, Mark laughed. Now give me the checkbook. If you don't, we're splitting up. Fine, but you'll be sorry, I replied. Mark didn't seem to get what I meant. He just grinned and said, no, I won't. Mark seems to have gotten it all wrong. I've got a plan to keep him from getting his hands on Nick's money. I'm Karen, 35 years old. My life was happy until 3 years ago when my husband, Nick, died in a car crash. Since then, I've been heartbroken and struggling to move on. Mark, who was Nick's best friend, has been a huge support. He took me out, suggested movies, and did everything to help me feel better. Thanks to him, I started to heal. Now, 3 years later, I'm thankful for Mark's kindness. But then Mark surprised me one day by proposing. Karen, will you marry me? He asked. I know it's complicated because of Nick, but don't you think it's time to focus on your own happiness? It's been 3 years since Nick's passing, and I feel like I've finally started to heal, thanks largely to Mark's support. I hadn't seriously thought about moving on until now, maybe because of the guilt I felt towards Nick. But when Mark proposed, something clicked. Could being with Mark bring happiness to both of us, and even to Nick? I'll make you happy, for both of us, including Nick, Mark promised, looking me in the eye. I chose to believe him. Okay, I trust you. Thank you. And so, I agreed to marry Mark. At first, married life with Mark was great. Following his wishes, I became a homemaker and focused on taking care of the household. Mark would always message me after work, eager to know what's for dinner and rush home. Even though it was my second marriage, our early days together were filled with happiness. Mark often pitched in with chores on his days off, and there were no complaints. I hoped this blissful life would continue. Things took a turn for the worse after about 6 months. It was around 11 p.m. when Mark finally got home. You're late again. I've asked you to let me know when you'll be late, I reminded him. Got invited out suddenly, he brushed it off. What could I do? You could have just gone to bed, and texting would have been enough. I need to get dinner ready, it's not that big of a deal. Stop nagging as soon as I walk in, he snapped, heading straight to the bathroom. He's been coming home late a lot lately, not just today. And there's no communication from him, not even a call or text. He says he's at a work event, but I wonder if he really needs to go, especially on his days off. He doesn't help with chores anymore. You should at least pitch in on your days off, I tell him. He doesn't bother to respond, saying, why should I work on my days off? That's your job. Figure it out yourself. But the biggest worry is our finances. Mark gets me what's left of his salary after his own expenses, but lately, that amount keeps getting smaller. This month, it was significantly less. When I asked about it, Mark casually said, oh, I gave some to my mom, that's why. How much did you give her? Around $1,000? I questioned, feeling frustrated. $1,000? I already said last month that giving her $800 was too much. We can't afford to be so generous. I insisted, my tone becoming firmer. If you subtract your allowance from that, we won't have enough for our own expenses. If she says she needs it, there's nothing I can do. Use your savings to cover the difference, Mark replied casually. What do you mean by or something? Why don't you find a part-time job or something? You're always just lounging around at home. You should do some work, I fired back. I became a full-time homemaker at Mark's request. His harsh words shocked me. But I realized we needed extra income to make ends meet. Reluctantly, I started looking for a job. Luckily, I found a part-time job with short hours, so it didn't interfere much with my routine. One day, I came home late from work to find the front door unlocked. Peering inside, I saw Mark was already home. Mark, you're back already? I exclaimed, surprised to find him at home. He spun around with a start, hastily concealing something behind his back. Hey, what were you just hiding? I asked, suspicion creeping in. Nothing, just forget about it. Mark quickly dismissed, but I wasn't convinced. You were hiding something. I persisted, snatching something from Mark's hand and realizing it was my bank book. What were you doing with this? I demanded, feeling a surge of anger. "Just checking something." "Give it back," Mark said, trying to take it from me. "You've saved up quite a bit, huh?" "I had no idea," he remarked, flipping through the pages. "You always say we're short on money," I argued, feeling betrayed. "What's going on?" "All this money should go to my mom," Mark stated casually, interrupting me. "Huh? That's not..." I began, shocked by his bold request. "It's only right to give such a large amount to my mom," he insisted, acting like it was the most reasonable thing ever. "Why should I give your mom my money?" I objected, feeling my anger rise. "Since when is the wife's money the mother-in-law's money? Don't you know that?" "Give me the bank book now," he demanded, his tone getting more aggressive. "No way. This money is mine," I declared, holding onto the bank book tightly. I fled from Mark, who was trying to snatch the bank book from me, and locked myself in the bedroom. While Mark banged on the door, demanding the bank book, I couldn't shake off the feeling of betrayal and anger. As I wrestled with what to do next, the only solution that seemed clear was to divorce Mark. I wondered, if Nick were here, what would he advise? The thought of Nick's absence hit me hard, and I couldn't help but cry. That money had to stay away from Mark, no matter what. I swiftly stashed the bank book in a locked suitcase and waited for Mark to come back. But he didn't return that day. Night fell, and I drifted off to sleep. When I woke the next morning, Mark still hadn't returned. With a clearer head than the night before, I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I refused to hand over the bank book to Mark. He had insulted not only me but also Nick. I couldn't forgive him. Gathering only the essentials, I waited for Mark's return. Finally, when he did show up, he seemed surprised to find me awake. "Where have you been?" I questioned, my voice steady but firm. "I went to my parents' place. Just came back from the real estate agent," he answered casually. "The real estate agent? With your $300,000? I asked, my suspicion growing. "I bought a new house for my mom. It's a brand new single-family home," Mark declared proudly, expecting me to go along with it. "Huh? Give me the bank book now. If not, we're getting a divorce," he demanded, his tone becoming stern. "I get it. Oh. Are you talking about splitting up?" "That's okay with me," I said calmly, surprising Mark. "Wait, what?" Mark was shocked, not expecting me to be so okay with it. Did he think I'd just give him access to our money if he mentioned divorce? "All right, but you'll be sorry," I warned. When I said that, Mark probably didn't understand what I really meant. He just smirked and said sure, whatever. Anyway, I went to the bedroom to grab the bags I'd packed. Mark was wrong if he thought he'd get half of our stuff. Around $15,000, but he was wrong. There was no way he'd get that much money from me. But just letting him off easy for insulting Nick wasn't enough. I came up with a better plan. It would teach Mark a lesson if he experienced what he put others through. I put my bank book back in the kitchen drawer, grabbed my bags, and said, "I'll send you the divorce papers later. Don't mess with my stuff. I'll move it when I can." Mark seemed suspicious of my careful planning, but I left anyway. I booked a room in a nearby business hotel and decided to stay there for about a week. During my time at the hotel, I found a rental apartment that was good for living alone. After sorting out the rental agreement, I started moving right away. I came back to the house while Mark was out in the afternoon to move my stuff. When I checked the bank book I left in the drawer, money had been taken out, leaving $150,000 behind, just like I expected. Mark probably used half for himself and bought a new house for his mom, but he regretted it later. I got the divorce papers from City Hall, filled them out, and sent them to Mark. But even after a week, then 2 weeks, they hadn't reached City Hall. And I couldn't reach Mark on the phone. After nagging him for a while, Mark finally answered, sounding annoyed. "Can you hurry up and send the divorce papers to City Hall?" "Divorce papers? Oh, I'll send them in next week," I said casually. "And you took money from my bank account, didn't you?" "That's illegal without my permission," Mark accused. "Idiot. It's not illegal to take money from a family member's account. Plus, half of it would be mine after the divorce, so it's fair." "I'm hanging up now," I said firmly, and I ended the call. Later on, it seemed Mark had finally sent the divorce papers to City Hall. When I checked, Mark and I were officially divorced. A month later, I was at work. The place where I worked part-time was offering full-time positions, and I applied. They accepted me. I heard some noise near the entrance, so I went to see what was happening. To my surprise, Mark and his mom were arguing with the receptionist. I rushed over and asked, "What's going on?" When I spoke, they turned to me urgently. "Karen, we've been searching for you. Please listen," Mark begged. "Please, Karen, forgive us," his mom added, sounding shaky. As they began to argue loudly, I somehow managed to calm them down. I told my boss about the situation, and we decided to talk things out at a nearby cafe. "What's going on?" I asked, feeling uneasy about the surprise encounter. With worried expressions, they started to explain frantically about the money. "I withdrew money from your account. It turns out it doesn't count as marital property. That money is..." Mark's voice trailed off, and I let out a huge sigh of disbelief. "That's what I've been saying all along. That was my own money. It was the life insurance payout when Nick passed away. We didn't know. We're really sorry. We'll try to give the money back somehow." "Can you not cause a big scene about this?" Mark pleaded. "You're right. You wouldn't want this blown out of proportion either, right?" I replied, feeling frustrated and resigned. "Let's settle this peacefully. Is that all you came to say?" As soon as I said that, their faces turned frantic. "Just that. I already figured it out when you took the money from the bank. How did you manage it? Don't tell me you think I didn't notice." I pressed on. "Well, we had to do it because we needed the money," Mark stammered, clearly struggling to explain. "Here's what likely happened. You can't withdraw $150,000 all at once from an ATM. It would take too long. So they probably tried to withdraw it from the counter, but for large sums, a power of attorney from the account holder is needed. I guess my mother-in-law wrote that power of attorney, and she probably pretended to be me when the bank called for confirmation. Essentially, my mother-in-law impersonated me. This is clearly illegal, and yet they were still trying to cover it up. There's no way I can forgive this," I said firmly, cutting off Mark's attempts to plead for forgiveness. "Lawyers have been coming to the office, employees are staring, and my boss is asking questions. My job is on the line. If things get worse, I might have to quit, and I won't find another job easily. Please, let's settle this without going to court," Mark begged, desperation clear in his voice. "My husband told me we're getting a divorce." I was just dazzled by the idea of a new house. It was a rash decision. I did find solace in this man after Nick's death. Maybe I could forgive him if he was sincere, but he also insulted Nick. If not for that, things wouldn't have gone this far, I thought to myself, feeling torn. It's out of my hands now. "Our next meeting will be in court," I declared, standing up to leave. "Wait, Karen, please," Mark and his mother pleaded, kneeling in the cafe. But I ignored them and walked out. In the end, they were in the wrong, and they ended up facing a hefty lawsuit for me, leading to a significant debt for Mark and my former mother-in-law. The $150,000 withdrawn from my account was returned by my former father-in-law out of his own pocket. The new house they bought was sold off, but it only covered some of the cost. Mark, unfortunately, lost his job and struggled to find another one in this tough economy. He ended up working as a live-in security guard, surviving on cheap sandwiches and barely making ends meet while paying off his debt. My former father-in-law separated from my former mother-in-law, who now lives in a modest apartment and works part-time jobs to get by. On the other hand, I've been enjoying my life, working steadily on my job. Although I'm single again after the divorce, I see it as a fresh start. Recently, a kind and caring man has entered my life. I'm taking things slowly to avoid repeating past mistakes, but I can't help but feel